Hello! That's right, I'm here. I'm using this model now. I'm using my vampire model for now.
I I can't see shit because all I can see is his YouTube screen.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we're going to learn about Paleo Whitestrake. Do you know the only thing I know about Paleo Whitestrake right now? Besides that really cool animation that's made.
Um, Going by the subtitle, he is the elf exterminator. He
Yeah.
walks in, takes a sniff, knocks on the local tree. You got elves.
It makes it sound like he kills Keebler elves, but,
Elves and trees go way back.
yeah.
But yes, he is the reason the Keebler company went out of business.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Uh, how should I put this? He is basically the Doom guy of elves for Elder Scrolls, from what I know.
And Dwarf Fortress players would agree with him.
Probably.
I'd like to ask you a question that's highly relevant to this video. Do
Okay.
you hate elves? It's a trick question, of course. You don't hate elves. Maybe you think you do, but you don't. You're probably
Ah.
annoyed with elves, sure. I mean, they can be arrogant.
Do you hate elves?
No, because I don't play Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, I find I'm inconsequential. It depends on the type of elves. Eldar, yeah, I'm annoyed.
It depends on the story.
Yeah, because some elves can
The
be.
reason I keep bringing up Dwarf Fortress up, do you know how elves work in Dwarf Fortress, Wolfie?
No.
Um, if they go into your thing and see that you're using wood for anything, they will declare fucking war on you.
Seriously?
Yeah. And for a while, they would sell you wooden goods that if you tried to sell back to them, they would declare war on you.
That's
Well, this has since been resolved since anything they sell you has the grown tag, as in they grew a fucking chair. But
that's stupid.
yeah, no. So you can imagine why a lot of Dwarf Fortress players, take a little time to maybe set up a bit of anti-elf weaponry.
Yeah. That's
Because
dumb.
like you can try and play around this and meet the demands. You're gonna die.
Oh my god.
You need that wood.
Oh yeah, wood is useful for a lot of things. Anyway, moving in this.
Is all hell, and that's pretty annoying, even if they're usually in the right. Real smug, those elves.
Yeah.
Dwarfs might hate elves, but even their attitude probably occupies that same realm of annoyance most of the time. Like, damn those
Yeah.
elves and their shoddy work ethic, that sort of deal.
Yeah,
Half the time
I
with
can see that
dwarfs,
with
it's just
elves.
a rivalry kind of thing, not
Pretty
true
much.
hatred. Don't get me wrong, plenty of dwarves hate elves, and they're more than happy to be vocal about it. But
True.
overall, I don't think most of them hate elves. But imagine with me for a moment, if you took every single dwarf who genuinely hated elves and fused them into one being. Then go
Okay.
further. Take that one combined
Oh,
super
dear.
hatred dwarf and give him the
Oh.
hate of every other being who has been wronged by elves for one reason or another. Maybe an elf
Oh.
killed their dog or
Well,
something.
then.
Why is it important? If you take this
Goddamn.
being and teach it to do nothing but hate elves for 1,000 years, how much rage it feels against the elves would
Dear
be nothing.
God.
And I mean nothing compared to the Elder Scrolls' very own Pelinal Whitestrake. This man hated elves.
Oh.
There are no words in any language, real or fictional, that could convey an iota of how much this man hated elves. And because
Oh,
I
boy.
loathe the Mer for making a mockery of the otherwise perfect elven archetype, let me tell you his story. Pelinal
Okay.
Whitestrake was someone who doesn't sound much like a fantasy character when you first explain what he is, but I suppose half the shit in the Elder Scrolls doesn't sound like it belongs in a fantasy setting. Like the Empire's space program.
Wait, what?
No, I don't mean what happens when you fight a giant too early in Skyrim. An actual
That's-
space program.
that's a
They
thing?
had one. Anyways, this man was a time-traveling cyborg from the future who was also the incarnation
What?
of a dead god sent back in time to presumably ensure that the rebellion of men against their elven overlord succeeded. Quite the
This was someone told me that the writer of this
This
might
is
have
someone's D&D character.
maybe someone told me that the writer they told me this specific line and they said that the writer was on crack. Whether he was being accurate or just making a joke, I have no idea.
That's fair.
description, isn't it? Admittedly, I couldn't find anything that expressly stated that was his purpose for going back in time, but as I keep going on, I feel like you'll come to agree with me on it. And his creator said he was based on the Terminator, which rather lends credence to that idea. His name comes from a couple of potential different places. Whitestrake is an easy one, it's because his hair was white as snow. But Pelinal is a bit trickier. It's likely not his given name, although as a time-traveling demigod robot, his given name could be anything from John to HK-47 to General Tullius XX. Pelinal itself is an elven name, though. And Pelinal was many things, but a fan of irony wasn't one of them, according to the books about him in the games. The name means either Glorious Knight or Star-Made Knight, and given that the A-leads were having the heads of their entire race dunked into the toilet by Pelinal, it's not likely they'd be the ones calling him glorious. Bit of a mystery, his name, much like a lot of the stuff about the guy, but at the end of the day, it sounds badass, and that's probably all the thought we need give the subject. Given the nature of anything involving time travel, and because of the fact that I couldn't find anything on which era he came from, I'm going to tell his history from the perspective of the timeline he showed up in. He first appeared very early in Tamriel's history during the Merethic era, when the elves known as the Aelids still ruled over the land of Cyrod. That should sound familiar, as indeed it was the land that would come to be known as Cyrodiil. At this point in time, it was believed to be a wild...
That's the capital of the human empire.
Gotcha. I didn't make it far in Skyrim, so most of these names are new to me.
It's fine. I'll try and jump in when I can.
The Aelids held a firm control over the races of men as slave owners. And they were not kind slave owners. Not that holding slaves is ever a kind thing to do, but the Aelids were quite happy to use their slaves for all sorts of nasty sacrificial business, as these evil precursor empires tend to love. Lots of danger worship and all that horrid stuff, just to really go the evil bastard extra mile. I promise I'm getting to his story, but there's still some more context to be had, and his tale is interwoven with others as well, such as one Alesia. She was once nothing more than an Aelid slave, but events transpiring in faraway lands would kickstart her journey to greatness. By that, I mean Skyrim started butchering elves like nobody's business. Ysgramorn is especially deadly to elves' axe and apparently founded quite the bloodline, and one of his descendants named Harold had unified Skyrim into a realm of men and drove the elves either out of the land or into extinction. Alesia had not only heard of this wonderful act of elven murder, but that the gods the Nords worshipped were much kinder to men than elves, so she prayed to them to send the nicest angel they had to help her out. The goddess Kinnereth sent a demigod...
All I can think of is send the nicest angel you have, and you just see a man chopping up elves like it's just moving through elves like it's
Be not afraid unless you're a fucking knife ear.
Pretty much.
A bowl man named Morahouse who thought she was hot as hell. You may notice if you've played Oblivion, the statues of Morahouse depict him as a regular dude. This is to skirt around the fact that Alesia fucked a bull. But moving on from that wonderful imagery, together with a bull friend with benefits, Alesia would rally her fellow slaves and become known...
I think that's because the in-game people don't want the creator of their empire to be known to fuck a bull.
Coward! I mean, the creator of our empire chucked in a cherry tree. It's really 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Oh my god.
Anyway. He didn't actually chuck down a cherry tree, by the way. That is a complete bullshit story.
I know, it is.
Everything you've heard about George Washington is probably a lie. Except for the part where he set off the French and Indian War. That he did do that.
Yeah, it was... There's a lot of details going to that I could talk about, but we're watching a video about lore, not actual history.
Fair.
And I do know this kind of thing mostly because I actually studied history in college.
Was the Slave Queen, and the rebellion against the Aelids began. It went alright at first. Not great, because the Aelids were powerful, but they were also suffering from the effects of a civil war between Aedra and Daedra worshippers, and Kinnereth kept giving Alesia visions on how to best fight elves. But with the third of her visions, did she receive news of someone special coming. A man who would lead her armies to victory. A man who would make himself known covered in the gore of elves he ripped apart single-handedly. Finally, dear viewer, does Pelinal Whitestrake enter the picture. During the Merethic era, there were reports of him showing up somewhere, gathering armies and forming kingdoms, and then just pissing off to do it again before he finally showed up for good to greet Alesia. I wasn't kidding when I said he showed up covered in gore, by the way. He quite literally walked into Alesia's camp with a sword and mace both covered with elf intestines. He simply said that this was all that was left of their eastern chieftains who were no longer running their stupid elven mouths. Here's a map of...
God damn. I wasn't expecting that just right now, just covered in gore walking to a camp. He's like, yeah, this is all the left of their chieftains.
Cyrodiil for you real quick. See the eastern bits of it? No more elves here. All of them dead.
Let me go back.
For you real quick. See the eastern bits of it? No more elves here.
Oh.
All of them dead because they made the grave mistake of existing in the same 1,000 square miles as Pelinal Whitestrake.
Goddamn.
Needless to say, he made a good first impression. It's also worth mentioning that Pelinal was immediately noted as having armor from the future time in the Song of Pelinal, and he had a killing light emanate from his hand. Now, whether or not either of these things are proof of his cyborg status, or if it was just armor from the time he came from, isn't strictly made clear. It's entirely possible that the killing light was just destruction magic, and as is shown in both Oblivion and Skyrim, the armor he wore was just plate armor, which at the time would have been unheard of in Tamriel except amongst the Dwemer. But either way, he made quite the entrance. Oh, and he also had the Amulet of Kings in place of a heart. Just jammed into his chest. Now that is some magical cyborg shit right there. And from there, Pelinal Whitestrake proceeded to quickly get to work doing what we all know and love.
I just like that it says, like killing elves. Tell me it is to kill elves. Tell me it is.
Have fun, buddy.
Yeah.
Murdering elves, and by the at the time only 8 divines did he get to killing them with gusto. Although contrary to what you might think, initially he wasn't just the doom guy of elves. Instead of going full Khornate Berserker from the get-go, he made a point of leaving the bulk of the elven army to his own forces. Instead, he would somehow get pre-arranged duels set up where he would challenge the enemy champions in leadership. The elites being elves, they arrogantly assumed they could handle this upstart human warrior. Shortly afterwards, he would slaughter the enemy champions in leadership. Now, the first few times this happens, I get it. We're in a fantasy setting, so maybe the first couple of guys hadn't heard about how he turned the entire eastern realm of the elites into a vacant parking lot. Maybe the guy who cast the long-distance message spells was just feeling sick that day. It can happen. But by the 12th time this happens, what do you have to gain by accepting? Honor? Is it about keeping your reputation? Because the guy...
It's elves, so of course it's about keeping reputation. It could be also the possibility that they just didn't believe what they were told about him. Because there's no way they could believe a human could do that. You know, rabble.
They don't know who the fuck's under that armor.
Yeah. They have no idea who this is, but they probably don't believe what they're told about him. Anyway.
Whose neck veins he ate probably kept neither. This is when he did that funny thing where he screamed the name of Riemann Cyrodiil, by the way. Which is especially worth mentioning because of how it affects the whole time travel deal. Was he just a big fan of the guy? Did Riemann or someone else send him back? Because if Pelinal was from a timeline where the elites were still in control, how the hell would he know Riemann's name? And if that isn't the case, we get the situation where Pelinal was sent back in time from a timeline that was already won, so why bother sending him back? You know what? I'm overthinking it, and either way, it's incredibly badass. Also funny. Riemann didn't even found the empire that was going to come about from the slave rebellion. Spoiler alert. That's several thousands of years later. Imagine Achilles screaming out George Washington's name at the Battle of Troy. This pattern of Pelinal killing the people in charge repeated itself several times across the world. The names of most of the people he dueled aren't really important because they only exist to die by Pelinal's robotic hands. The guy whose neck veins he ate was called Haramir of Copper and Tea, and the only reason I
thought he was joking about him eating his neck veins. Did he just rip out his throat? God damn, what the hell?
I mean, the veins are right there, just in biting range.
Oh my god.
And they're a pretty good off button.
He's wearing full plate and a helmet. How the hell did he...
Like, I don't know. Right. But, like, I'm just going to send you the best image I have of this time-honored strategy.
Time-honored strategy of what?
Neck vein ripping.
Oh my god.
With your teeth.
Anyway, moving forward.
Bringing that up is because that is the dumbest name I think I've ever heard. Who calls themselves out without turning red from embarrassment? I am the Lord of Copper and Tea. Whatever, you stupid nerd. Pelinal also cursed a different elite lord to prevent him from resurrecting, showing that he's got some brains to match all that brawn.
Nice.
Now, I admit, I'd perhaps slightly exaggerated about him killing every single elven chieftain and leader in the east of Cyrodiil. What really happened is he killed a bunch of them, and then within the span of a year, actually wiped them all out at the head of Alesia's armies. Which, honestly, is more impressive. Off-screen kills are always kind of vague, and detractors of Whitestrake might say it actually took decades because of how super awesome the elves are. But this took a measly year. 1 year in the eastern portion of Cyrodiil is certifiably elf-free. That's the Pelinal guarantee. He simply could not be stopped. Any elven weapon that managed to hit him just didn't work, and soon enough he had slaughtered his way to northern Cyrodiil. Alesia had sent
damn.
messengers to Skyrim asking for help, and when they finally made it to Pelinal, presumably by following the trail of burning cities and bodies, his hair had been stained brown with elf blood. Is
God
that how that
damn.
works? I don't know, but it's awesome. He wears a helmet too, which is the really impressive part. Complete coverage of his head, and he still killed so many elves he stained his hair from it. Upon
That's
seeing him,
insane.
the Nords said that their god Shor had returned to deliver them from the elves. And here's where I'd like to take a break from the story to tell you a bit about Pelinal himself.
Okay.
Pelinal did not like gods. He disliked elves the most, but gods were second place in the competition of things Pelinal Whitestrake would like to not exist. In third place were people that called Pelinal a god, or compared him to God, or said the words, "Oh my god," in an expression of surprise around him. One dude named Plantinu, which as an aside I guess it wasn't only the elves of the First Era who had a monopoly on stupid names, had the balls to suggest that Pelinor was the Shezarene, the incarnation of the god Shezar, also known as Shor, or Lorcan, or that dude whose heart spawned a whole lot of AI voice memes. Plantinu was later smothered by moths in his sleep, an insect that is closely related to the dead god. No, of course, strictly speaking, this could have been a coincidence. Maybe Shor...
He probably is related to Lorcan, then. If, he went so far as, you know, snuffing some dude out who, you know, suddenly moths and creatures just crawling down your throat and killing you. Yeah.
Oh. Pikmin.
Yeah. That's kind of horrifying.
Oh, yeah. Pikmin is a nightmare world.
A lot of it is a nightmare world. Insect-sized creatures are nightmarish. And I'm glad
they're even smaller than that.
Well, I'm glad that they can't get any bigger. Anyway.
Happen to not like that guy in particular. Just like it's a massive coincidence that Lorcan is also missing his heart and is doomed to wander the lands of Nirn as punishment.
Yeah,
and surely
it's
it
his
is
heart.
further coincidence that Lorcan in just about all of his incarnations is a sort of patron god of man specifically. But yeah, Pelinal didn't like when you called him out on being of a divine nature.
Yeah, he's probably using Lorcan's heart. That's what that jewel is in his chest, probably. That seems like
Yep.
That's
Yep. Always wear the fucking power MacGuffin you ripped out of a god's chest.
I think he just is the incarnation of the dude, though. For some reason, sent back in time as a Terminator, but, you know. I don't know.
Listen, if you got to fuel your Terminator with anything, it would be the heart of a god.
I guess so.
Most people he would just kill with his hands rather than moths, but either way, don't say he's a god when he's in earshot. So to get back to the story, Pelinal was rather unpleased with these Nords for calling him that, and spat on the ground in front of them and chewed them out for profaning that name. Which rather throws a wrench into things, because does he really hate gods? Or does he just hate being compared to them? Lorcan's track record with the rest of the gods ends with them ripping his heart out and shooting it into the planet after all. Some bad blood is understandable.
Yeah.
Regardless, he apparently decided in this instance that going to kill more elves was more important than killing this group of Nords, so Pelinal took them to western Cyrodiil to assist in driving the remaining A-leads towards the center of the province. I've said a lot about how much Pelinal dislikes certain things, and compared him to both Doomguy and a Cornate Berserker. You may be wondering if he's just another character like that, whose likes start and end with brutal murder, but such is not the case. Pelinal wasn't a fan of much, but he did have a few
even
people that were
Doomguys
close
like
companions
start
of
and
his.
end like
First
that.
among them is Alesia,
Yeah.
Skateboard.
Yeah, he likes video games. He plays the guitar.
Likes toys. It's a pet rabbit.
Yeah.
Doomguy has a very nuanced set of likes. It's just we only ever see him when the situation calls for the brutal dismemberment of the legions of hell.
Yeah, he also keeps vinyls, apparently.
Nice.
fan of much, but he did have a few people that were close companions of his. First among them is Alesia, who Pelinal greatly respected. He regarded her as being a woman of action. In fact, she was one of the only people who was allowed to remark upon him being anything but mortal, as she could back up what she said. His exact words were that Alesia enacts rather than talks, as language without exertion is dead witness. I'm assuming that means that Alesia doesn't just spout bullshit and puts her money where her mouth is, but whatever you want to imagine that line is meaning, it's clear Pelinal held her in high regard.
Yeah.
You might also notice that I keep switching how I say her name throughout the video. That's because you all make fun of me for how I pronounce things, so I might as well do it on purpose this time. Next up is Morahouse, the bowl man.
Oh my god. I wasn't expecting him to say that. Well, you do your thing, PancreasNoWorks. You do your thing, and I'll keep being
probably get that that whole pancreas thing checked out though.
Oh no, he's a diabetic.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why his name is PancreasNoWorks. Get it?
So you already got it checked out then.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I wish
that
you the best.
Alesia had a kid with. Morehouse was considered by Pelinal to be his nephew. Whether or not this is literally the case is left unclear.
The
And
Bull
the
Man.
author of the Song of Pelinal books mentions that it might have just been for divine shits and giggles they considered each other as uncle and nephew. But regardless, they were close. They fought alongside one another in combat frequently, and Pelinal held his prowess as a warrior in especially high regard, as he would never instruct the Bull Man on how to fight or lead.
Cool.
And if Pelinal Whitestrake says you're hot shit, you're probably hot shit.
Yeah.
Morehouse was the only being who was not only allowed to talk about Pelinal being a god, but who Pelinal also admitted to his divine nature to.
Oh,
The specific conversation mentioned in the song is about Pelinal warning Morehouse not to fall in love with Alesia, as when gods fall in love, they can change the world and not necessarily for the better. Which is
That is also true. that makes a lot of sense to tell him, like, okay, don't think about having kids with her, because you don't know what could come of that. Yeah, that sounds about right.
a wonderful bit of hypocrisy from the divine cyborg, as
Huh?
we come to the third major character Pelinal is close with. The hoplite named Huna, a man who Pelinal rescued from slavery and trained to be a warrior.
There's-
He was also Pelinal's
there's hoplites in
boyfriend.
this game?
I guess since they couldn't have
I guess so, and he's also Pelinal's boyfriend, as he just said.
and trained to be a warrior. He was also Pelinal's boyfriend. I guess since they couldn't have kids, this time it was alright. No doubt Pelinal was undertaking some gold medal winning mental gymnastics to justify this, while also telling Morehouse he couldn't sleep with Alesia.
I mean,
or
it's
maybe he
God
was just
stuff, so
weirded
who
out by
knows?
the whole bull fucking a woman thing,
Yeah.
but didn't want to be too on the nose about it. Tragically for Pelinal and Huna, but wonderfully for everyone who wants to see elven heads on pikes, Huna was killed in combat against the Aliens, and now we get to the really fun stuff.
no.
Because Huna's death sparked the first of what is simply called Pelinal's madness. Before this, Pelinal liked killing elves. No doubt when he was in the thick of combat, he was having the time of his life. But there was a method to it. Like I said, he hunted down enemy champions specifically. There was clearly thought put into who he was slaying. During a bout of his
music is
madness,
playing.
however, there was nothing but murder on his mind. See elf, kill elf. See many elf, kill many elf. See a kingdom of elves, kill a kingdom of elves.
God
Whereas
damn.
once he was going
Yeah.
out of his way to just kill champions, now
He's
the
pissed
entire
about
elven
losing his
army was in
boyfriend.
his crosshairs, while everyone he was theoretically commanding sat back in horror as he turned tens of thousands of elves into chunky salsa. Doom Guy for elves has finally come out to truly shine.
Yeah,
He would
he's
even
crushing.
shout out to Akatosh and say that he did this for their shared madness, and said that he saw Akatosh watching him watch Akatosh.
What?
Although I do have to wonder if Pelinal was watching Akatosh watch Pelinal watch
Oh my
Akatosh
God,
watch
don't do
Pelinal
that.
watch Akatosh. The
What?
Song of Pelinal says that he reduced entire swaths of land
Ow.
to void when he entered his madness, and in the Elder Scrolls, that is a very significant choice of phrase.
I don't know what he means by that. I don't know much about Akatosh. I think Akatosh is the god of magic.
Isn't that a clothing store at the mall? Oshkosh Akatosh?
No.
And in the Elder Scrolls, that is a Pelinal watch Akatosh. The Song of Pelinal says that he reduced entire swaths of land to void when he entered his madness. And in the Elder Scrolls, that is a very significant choice of phrasing. Without getting into too much of an explanation on that one, to me that signifies he didn't just destroy those lands, he removed them from existence entirely.
What?
A whole countryside retconned out of
What?
reality by someone in the setting. When this happened, there was
Yeah.
no single being on Nirn that could calm him
It's
down.
all
Not
error
Morehouse,
texture
not
now.
Alesia, not the ghost of his dead boyfriend. I don't think Huna ever actually tried to calm him down from
I don't
beyond the
think-
grave, but
Wow.
if he did, it didn't work. Kinnereth herself would have to wash away the blood
Sounds
from
about right,
elven
so that
camps
happened.
with rain, because otherwise there was no removing the level of gore that Pelinal left
God
behind.
damn.
And indeed, it was only when Alesia prayed to the 8 divines as a whole to calm Pelinal down that he would ever stop his rampaging. It took
Oh.
the entirety of the main Elder Scrolls pantheon just to calm this one guy the fuck down. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. He would regularly go berserk and start turning the jungle of Cyrodiil into a barren wasteland.
God
Alesia had to
damn.
go to lengths to appease
I-
the divines because they nearly left the world in disgust over the sheer amount of rage Pelinal was putting out.
He is pissed off. He went into this.
Sounds like it.
He went into this regularly, and all of the gods quite literally had to stop him every once in a while. Dear Lord, how many elves were he killed? I shouldn't be asking that. It's Pelinal.
At one
Yes,
point, he even
he
butchered a
killed
whole bunch of
yes amounts
Khajiit
of
because he
elves.
thought they were a type of elf.
Oh.
I don't have the fondest opinion of
Oh,
him because
no!
of this. I doubt he really cared one way or
Khajiit's
the other
not
about
elf.
what they thought
Khajiit
about him,
have
though. They were
wares.
just lucky he didn't go south into elsewhere. One warrior
Yeah.
who witnessed Pelinal's madness asked him how he felt during it over a few drinks, and he responded that it felt like when the dream no longer needed its dreamer. What another interesting choice of words, given the
That's a
nature of this
strange way
setting.
to
And
say
hey,
it.
it adds something else to the list of things Pelinal likes. Beer. In spite of his complete insanity, or perhaps because of it, Pelinal and Alesia's forces had over time driven the Aelids towards the center of Cyrodiil and into the area around the White Gold Tower.
Ooh.
In an interesting turn of events, Pelinal found himself challenged by the greatest champions the Aelids had left to offer, Umaril, a demigod of the Aelids' own. I hope you remember how I said that the Daedra worshippers won the Aelid Civil War because Umaril was half Daedra. Surely enough for someone like that.
Daedra are the more chaotic faction. They're the actual, like, demons. So
My
basically,
understanding of Daedra is so the universe was created, and the Daedra were the ones standing around with their thumbs up their butt while the universe was created. They didn't create the universe, and the name Daedra means they're specifically not of this world.
seems like it. Daedra are insane, and I don't like dealing with their gods, especially in game.
That he summoned servants of Meridia, Aurorans, to aid him in battle. He called out to Pelinal to face him in combat, and Pelinal was all too happy to oblige. Alesia and her soldiers, as well as the Nords, were rather less eager, however.
Yeah.
They knew this would be the biggest battle of the war yet, and they weren't exactly
They wanna
keen to
be
storm in the magical
precautious.
tower filled with elves and demons. Alesia and her council wanted to take a rather more thought-out and cautious approach. Care to take a guess what you think Pelinal did in response to this suggestion? If you said he called everyone a pussy and marched in to face the elves himself, you'd be right. All on his own did the Whitestrake face the Aelid and their minions, and by God was it a slaughter. Every elf or demon that crossed his path was cut to ribbons. While the text doesn't specifically say it was the case, I imagine the White Gold Tower was given a new coat of red paint that
Probably,
day.
yeah.
But this time things were different. While he was still murdering elves left and right, our hero was slowly but surely being wounded by the weapons that they wielded.
Oh, no.
Marl had made sure to forge only the most deadly weapons against the Crusader, and they were wearing him down. Only when the majority of the elves and Aurorans present were slain did Umaru finally come to face Pelinal in combat.
What a coward.
They had quite the epic battle. They were
Bitch.
described as being equally matched. Two warriors of legend come to face each other. An incarnation of the Daedra fighting an incarnation of the creator of the world itself. But for your consideration, Pelinal was more or less crippled and worn down after fighting through an entire army all by himself.
Yeah.
For those of you inclined to Warhammer comparisons, which given my usual content I imagine is most of you, this was like Sanguinius fighting Horus after days of constant battle. But
Yeah.
unlike Sanguinius, Pelinal finished the job, because the rage the Primarch of the Blood Angels felt was nothing compared to the rage Pelinal felt when confronted with a person with knives for ears. Pelinal ripped off Amaral's wings and killed him dead. Just to rub salt in the wound, he called Amaral's helmet the ugliest thing he'd ever seen, and said his ancestors must have all been bitches to end up siring such a worthless being as Amaral was.
God
And the last
damn.
remaining Aelid kings facing the Crusader, who until now had presumably been busy quietly shitting their pants in the corner,
Yeah.
flew into a rage and cut the weakened Crusader into 8 pieces. His dying screams were heard by Alesia and her war council, and with the blowing of Morahouse's war horn, they stormed the gates and slew any elves they could find. Which wasn't many, because all they really saw were a few elves who had already started running away, and a whole lot of corpses. Morahouse found what was left of Pelinal, but because cutting this man's head off only started the process of him dying, they had a long talk about things that only Morahouse would ever know. Pelinal warned Morahouse that Amaral was not truly dead and would one day return, and that no longer could he protect mankind from his wrath.
Damn.
Despite this, Alesia's slave rebellion was successful, in no small part because Pelinal's kill count was at least equal to that of the rest of the army combined.
Yeah.
And after that last conversation with his nephew, Pelinal Whitestrake finally died. The Chezarine knew peace and could dream forevermore. Except no, he couldn't quite yet, because
What?
apparently he was present at Alesia's deathbed. And
How?
because of that goddamn time-traveling thing, I have no idea how this works.
Neither
Was
do
it his
I.
ghost? Did Lorcan manifest as Pelinal one last time, just so Alesia could die with a familiar face by her side? Did he stop by her deathbed first
I don't
before
know.
he traveled back in time? Was Michael
Yeah.
Kirkbride mainlining LSD when he wrote this? I give up. You need a damn degree in Elder Scrollsology to understand what's happening.
And I
half the
don't have
time. This is
one.
beyond me. I'm pretty
I
sure
also
the
don't
only
have
reason we
one.
definitively know he's a cyborg is because Michael Kirkbride called him a swarm foam war fractal from the future in a blog post once.
What?
And before you ask, no, I don't know what that means either. Regardless, he shows back up in Oblivion as an actual spirit this time, helps the hero of Kvatch out by showing him a location of a shrine his friends built for him, and Amaru is finally defeated once and for all. Turns out you needed the full 9 divines to kill him for good. 8 wasn't cutting it. Thank you, Talos, for once again being the best god. Now, before I stop talking about this guy, I want to take a look at one thing he said in particular. That line about the dream no longer needing its dreamer. There's a few ways you can interpret that, and I promise I only stole one of them off of someone's Reddit explanation of the line. The most mundane possibility, and the one that I'm stealing, is that the line refers only to Pelinal's madness. That once he enters that state, it's self-perpetuating. The dream is his madness, and it no longer needs any input from Pelinal to keep going. That is to say, he no longer has to want to kill elves to keep killing elves, as his madness exists for one reason alone, and that's to kill every elf on the planet. It's the least interesting explanation in my opinion, but it's also the one that leads to the most elf murder, and in the Elder Scrolls, that's something I support. And it would explain why the gods themselves were needed to calm him down. He was incapable of doing it himself.
On autopilot.
Nothing short of divine intervention would snap him out of his trance. The second explanation is one that you could probably see coming a mile away. Chim. The whole thing about realizing the Elder Scrolls is a dream of a sleeping being known as the Godhead, and gaining god powers from that as you start lucid dreaming. That's a very simplified explanation, because going into more would extend this video's length by about 3 hours, but that's the gist of it. And it's by no means a hard connection to make. When you start delving into the subject of dreams and whatnot with Elder Scrolls lore, Chim is always looming in the background waiting to make everything confusing. Originally, I had an explanation for the specifics of how Chim and Pelinal were potentially related, but upon rereading it, I realized my explanation sucked and deleted it. So I'm just gonna throw Chim in your face and hope you can figure out how to make sense of it. Quality YouTube work right here. But personally, I believe something else. I think it still has to do with Lorcan, but I don't think it has anything to do with Chim. Lorcan in many of his incarnations is a god of men. Perhaps the dream was not Nirn and Mundus, not Chim, but Lorcan's desire for mankind to be able to prosper without his interference. With Pelinal's madness pretty much clearing Cyrodiil of all the elves that would see mankind kept subjugated, this dream no longer needed its dreamer. Mankind no longer needed a Shezarine, and by extension Pelinal, to keep itself safe. He single-handedly slaughtered his way to a brighter future for mankind, and his dream could now be free without him any longer being needed. Or maybe I'm entirely wrong. That's the fun thing about Elder Scrolls lore. It's very interpretive. And not interpretive in the GW way, where everything might be true, but might also just be in-universe propaganda, because the company wants to have a cop-out for everything that might annoy people. It's interpretive in a there's generally no single right answer kind of way. So maybe I'm overthinking it, or maybe I'm underthinking it. I suppose the truth of that theory ultimately depends on whether or not you like my answer. And I talk out of my ass quite a lot, so I understand if you don't like the answer. Either way, thus finally ends the tale of Pelinal Whitestrake. May he rest easy for all time, knowing he did more to kill elves than any other being in fiction. Except maybe Slanesh, but that's cheating.
Elves, you know?
So, what did you think of Pelinal Whitestrake?
Oh, I wasn't saying anything. I was just commending him for all the elves he killed.
Oh. Well, that works too. That makes the most sense. And my phone is going off for some reason. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming by. If you like what I'm doing here, please do consider following. And I'll see you guys all later.
Like, every follow is a dead elf.
Every follow is definitely a dead elf somewhere. Probably in Elder Scrolls, because let's be honest, in Elder Scrolls they kind of deserve it. Because
I don't know enough about what they've done in Elder Scrolls.
They started another war with the Empire, tried to force them into not worshiping their god. And, like, tried to say the stuff that the hero did in Oblivion, apparently said, no, we did all that. We did all that, believe us. Yeah. So, I'll see you all later. Have a good day, and yeah, we'll look at more Warhammer Fantasy stuff for fun.
See you then.
See ya.